We are right now usually only teaching in one way. And that doesn't work for most people. We need to provide a buffet of options. And one of the things that's so important is that all of the extreme high achievers surrounded themselves with not one, but a team of mentors. So what are we doing within the organization to allow people to organically meet potential mentors? So I teach some of the ways to do that, how to approach people, because you should never ask someone to be your mentor. That sounds like you want them to take on another job, right? But I offer other ways that you can actually do that, which makes people want to help you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. Today I'm joined by Ruth Gotian, who's a leadership coach, keynote speaker, educator, and social scientist who researches the most successful people in the world to learn about their mindsets and their practices. In the episode, we're going to talk about her new book, The Success Factor, developing the mindset and skill set for peak business performance. We'll talk about the top 4 attributes for high achievers and some practical tools that you can use to help your people become more than average. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. That being said, let's jump in. Welcome to the show, Ruth. How are you?
I am doing so well. How are you?
Not too bad. I think last time we spoke, you were just about to launch the book. Here we are a couple months later. How are things? How's life since?
Oh, wow. It's been incredible. The book has done incredibly well. It won some awards. It got Amazon bestseller status.
Wow.
It's gotten into the hands of incredible people. It was featured on NBC Sports. So
Amazing.
It's been doing all right.
You said to me last time, it's like Chris, like giving birth to a child. You're not the first person to say that, by the way. I mean, so many people say that to me. I'm like, oh, sometimes they're like, it's a relief that it's just finally the book's out there after all of the years of research and everything.
And it's scary, you know, because I loved it. I poured my heart and soul into it. And I've had a few people look it over and edit it, but when it goes out into the world, you have no idea how the public's going to react. Yeah. It's terrifying, really.
Yeah.
But I'm excited it's landed well.
Yeah. And for those people that may have missed it in the intro, the book is The Success Factor, developing the mindset and skill set for peak business performance. So make sure you check it out. So actually, before we get into that, tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and your journey to where we are now.
Yeah. How I got started studying extreme high achievers. It's not what everyone does.
Yeah, you know what I want to do when I grow up. Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't start there. Although I was one of those, as we spoke about before. I was a strange kid that I was like, I was fascinated with how do I not be poor and how do I become highly successful in whatever I do. So I suppose there are a few of us out there. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of us there because I don't believe anyone wakes up in the morning aiming to be average. I think people want to be successful and don't really know how. And they try all these random things that don't work. So I don't like random. So I went to figure it out, but it actually started long before. My first two, my bachelor's and master's degrees are in business. And like all good business students, I went to work in finance and banking and realized that just because you're good at something doesn't mean you enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So after 2 years, I left and I went back into education, specifically academic medicine. And there was this problem. I used to run an MD PhD program. My students would get both an MD and a PhD degree simultaneously. And everyone was interested and focused on the people who were leaving the profession. I mean, there were books written about it, articles written about it. Every annual conference, we would talk about it. And in 20 years, the needle hadn't moved. And I was more interested in the other end of the spectrum. The people who are so good that their work and their productivity would more than make up for those who are leaving. So I kept thinking, how do we get more of those people?
Yeah.
So at the age of 43, while working full-time and raising my family, I went back to school to find out. And I studied success. I studied the most successful physician scientists of our generation. And over the years, it has progressed to astronauts and other Nobel Prize winners and Olympic champions and NBA champions and CEOs. And I basically reversed engineered their path to success and wrote a blueprint for it, and then wrote the book and go all over the world teaching about it. So, and here we are.
And I do want to touch upon you because you kind of have a dual careers almost and dual roles at the moment. So you just share briefly a little bit about that, because I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so the writing the book is on the fringes of my free time, but I actually have a full-time job where I'm the chief learning officer in anesthesia at Weill Cornell Medicine, which is a big Ivy League academic medical center in New York City. So my day job is to really elevate people and develop them and help them become leaders and the best versions of themselves. And then I do all of this other writing as well, both the book and then Forbes and Psychology Today. And
it's so
so
cool.
I write academic articles and play articles.
Yeah. Oh, I love it because you're a perfect synergy, first and foremost, that you're, but you're also kind of, you're researching it, you're putting out great content that way, but you're also then executing on it internally in an organization.
Yeah.
Very rare that people have, the ability, because you also get the satisfaction of seeing the results internally of what happened. Because a lot of consultants or researchers I speak to, they say, Chris, one of the things I miss is that I go in and do a bit of work in this business and I leave, and I don't get to see the fruits of that work and the impact. So you get to see both.
I get to see it all the time, every single day, and I get to see it in healthcare, which is incredible. Because talk about people who have really gone through so much in the last 2.5 years. And what is incredible is that I can take academic theory and implement it and put it into practice. And I never want to lose the ability to be able to do that. So being able to, nobody wants to read about theory. I mean, I could talk about it and geek out about it, but nobody really wants to talk about it. They want to know, how is this going to help me and how's it going to help me now? So I am able to convert that and constantly pivot based on the changes in the industry, the changes in our world. And that's what makes no 2 days the same. And that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I'm jealous. Yeah, it's really cool. What would you say was were there any surprises? What was the biggest surprises during the research phase?
It was actually the fourth element of success.
So let's go through those. That's a good point. That's a good segue. Let's go through those 4 areas for everyone that you identified.
Okay. Sure. So these are not habits, because we cannot copy other people's habits, which is the biggest mistake people usually make, which is why, they wake up at 5 a.m. and I'll get more done. Well, not if you're a night owl and don't go to bed till 3 a.m.
That's me, by the way, just put it out there.
Right.
I'm not a morning person. So yeah.
And I am a morning person.
My co-founder is as well. So he's the really early ariser and I'm like the late one. So yeah, good point.
So that's why there's productivity 24 hours a day.
That's true.
But that's why you can't have the same habits, right? But what you can emulate is mindset. So that's what these really are. So the first one is really the high achievers have found out what they're passionate about. This is why they were put on this earth. This is the fire in their belly. This is the reason they wake up in the morning and can't wait to get started. This is the reason that they cannot quiet their mind at night. So that's the first one. It's their intrinsic motivation. It's not about diplomas, awards, rewards. That's extrinsic motivation. That's when other people are judging us, and that's not sustainable. But when you can find from the inside what it is that you're excited about, that's going to get you through all the hard times, all the challenges, the pandemics, whatever it is. So that's the first one. The second one is their work ethic, their perseverance, their grit, their resilience, whatever words you want to use. Really what it means, it's how they view challenges. So high achievers never question if they will overcome the challenge. They know that they will. Right? Instead, they focus on how. What is the strategy I haven't thought of yet? And if you think of all the great people who you admire, nothing was handed to them. They had to work their butts off for it, overcoming challenge after challenge after challenge, because that's what we can identify with. And that's what we want to see in other people. And the third one is a really strong foundation, which is constantly being reinforced. So what you did early in your career, you're going to do later in your career as well. You are never, ever going to rest on your laurels. It always goes back to the basics. And last but not least, and this is the one that surprised me the most, is despite all of their awards, all of their accolades, the high achievers are constantly learning, and they will learn in different ways from different people. So we've heard of the billionaires, Mark Cuban and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. They're known for reading 3 to 8 hours a day. It's not reading that made them billionaires. It's opening their minds up to new knowledge. So they do it by reading, but if you're not a reader, there are other ways that you can open your mind up to new knowledge. You can listen to podcasts and webinars. Hopefully we're sharing some good stuff here. And there's articles and there's YouTube videos and Clubhouse, really whatever works for you. It's about opening your mind up to new knowledge and making connections that other people don't yet see.
Yeah, I love that.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know where to start. I suppose start from the beginning, because that's the first one you mentioned. How do people find that? Because so many people, I feel like I was quite. I only realized probably a year into this company. I went to a mastermind, sort of a 2-day mastermind we got invited to, and there were some incredible people there that we very lucky to be in a room with, to be honest. And for the longest time, I felt like our careers were built around not wanting to be poor, as I said, shared before we hit record. Yeah. So it wasn't coming from the right place. It was really a driver of coming from, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to see the kind of things I saw growing up with violence and drugs and kind of the place we grew up. And after a while, it didn't matter how much more money we made, we weren't happy.
That's right.
So we thought we'd get to this job. We're going to get to, I remember me and Shane were like, all right, when we get to this bracket, 50K, I'm going to be happy. Then it was 100K, then 150K. And then it was, I want to be VP of sales. And it was like, why am I not happy? And we realized because it wasn't really in line with what we are, as you say, intrinsic motivators, why, our purpose. And when we started the company, we made like a quarter of that, a lot less when you start a company with no money, but we were so happy. Yeah. And it was really weird. And we were like, what are we so happy for? Where everyone else around us is saying, you guys made a horrible decision. You should have stayed with this career. And we finally were kind of let loose to basically bring our dreams to life and everything around that. And I feel like we found that. And I realized that my passion was more around product development, more on the creative side, building live stream studios. And Shane realized that his passion was more around the finance operations side, which I hate. So it's great that he loves
great
that.
Partnership.
And we realized that, oh, wow. So we sat down one day, we mapped out our energy. We kind of wrote down what are the things that give us energy, what takes it away. And that's how we built the business around those areas as well. So it took us a while to find that. So how do you recommend people to figure out what they do love and what they are passionate about?
Yeah, so I actually take people through a passion audit to figure what it is that they love.
Love that.
Yes, so a passion audit, really you can distinguish between what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you would do for free if you could, what are the things that just sap your energy. Now remember my finance story. You can be really good at something and not enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to figure those things out. And that is so important. And what you need to realize is that your passions can change over time. So when I finished my doctorate, I did my own passion audit. Now, I had been running a program cradle to grave, everything from recruitment, admissions, budgets, grants, operations, crisis management, grant writing, retreat planning, alumni affairs, you name it, I did it. And I did my own passion audit. And what I quickly realized was that I don't enjoy doing operations. Now, I had been doing it for over 20 years. And I said, what am I going to do now? this is what I've been doing for so long. And I realized I could do it. I'm good at it, but it sucks the life out of me.
Yeah.
Now, I may go back to it one day. I don't know, but I didn't want to do it anymore, which is why I transitioned to what I do now, which I love, which means when you love it, you're willing to take more on because there's a challenge. There's a challenge that lives there. So I always tell people that they need to, every time they have a transition in their life, they need to do a new passion audit. Now, if your listeners want one, there's one on my website that they can download.
Because I think that comes with a book, right? Or something like that. Because I think I remember there's some resources, online resources. Is that one of the online resources that comes with the book?
It comes with the book. It's also on my website as well.
Nice.
If anybody wants to download it.
Whoever's listening right now, that link's in the chat. But make sure in the audio description, wherever you're listening or watching, but don't leave yet. Click it later. Listen to the rest of the episode and then click on it. I love that because you are right. And so many of my friends and family members are in jobs that they're very good at, very successful at, but they're not passionate about it. And they get stuck in these sort of, what do they call it? Sort of the golden handcuffs. They got the mortgage, they got the, the nursery fees and everything. That's and they feel like, well, I can't ever go out and change. Yeah. And then they just settle, and it's quite sad.
It's very sad. And you can actually change things within your job because really you only need to spend 20% of your time doing what you love in order to reduce burnout.
Oh, wow.
That's a big deal, right? So it really depends how much, if you're not ready to totally switch, maybe there are things you can do in your current job that has more of the elements of the things that bring you energy, where you love the challenge. It's there.
Yeah, it is there. I remember having this conversation with my wife because I was in that same conundrum. I was like, we're doing really well. We're making great money. We've kind of got our dream house, etc. We've got, a daughter on the way. It's the worst time to quit. Like it was this year, like on paper, it was insane. Like we just got the mortgage, baby on the way. We just spent all of our money, our life savings went on the house and our wedding, had no money in the bank account. And yet I was considering quitting. But I realized if I didn't do it then, I probably would never have done it. So, and that's the conversation we had.
When is a good time?
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. There is never a good time. If you think there's going to be this moment that comes up that makes sense, it doesn't exist. I remember literally we had like 3 months of savings. That was it. I had to make it work in 3 months. And that was pretty stressful. 3 months of outgoings before I was broke.
Wow, but you did it.
We did it. Yeah, we did. There's definitely a lot of motivation to wake up in the morning to make stuff happen. So yeah, exactly. But again, it's one of those things where not to sound arrogant, but we also realized that worst case scenario, we were very successful in our jobs that we would be rehired. I even had...
You had that safety net.
Yeah, and I won't even say safety net, just belief in my ability. I just believed in Chris enough to know that if this doesn't work out, I'm very successful in sales. And there'll be many, many companies that need great salespeople. So I was like, worst case scenario, we'll do that. What about the second part, that relationship with failure? And I'd love to, that's something that's always fascinated me as well, is people's, I have a very positive relationship with the word failure. I love it. It actually excites me. But I've conditioned myself to love failure, as sad as that sounds, but it's not often the case, and we're kind of taught that way growing up and conditioned, I feel like, through schooling and everything else.
Right. Well, it's not failure, right? It's data.
Yeah, exactly.
It's data. And the question is, what do you do with that data? Right? Are you going to use it to improve in the future? So all high achievers understand that this failure, any information you get from challenges, is an opportunity for enhancement. So they actually crave it. They want to know. They're like you. They want to know, what can I do to make myself better, faster, more efficient, higher, whatever it is, because there's a learning opportunity there. There's always that new challenge. Now, there is the story in the book. So I share the stories of some of the great people who I interviewed. Scott Hamilton, he is an Olympic champion figure skater. He won the first gold medal in men's figure skating for the United States in almost a quarter of a century. And he had a problem in the Olympics. He was a great skater. I mean, a great skater. He would do backflips. But when it came to the technical things, and they used to do, you have to do these figure eights. And if you're off on your blade by even a millimeter, you would lose points. And this was his Achilles heel, right? It was too confined. And when you talk to Scott Hamilton, he's got this explosive personality. It's huge. And he said this was his Achilles heel. It was so hard for him. So he decided he was going to work at it so hard that he would fall in love with it. And that's exactly what happened. And in 1984, when he was going in the Olympics, the score between Scott Hamilton and Canadian Brian Orser was tied. Do you know what the tiebreaker was?
No way. What, that one bit?
The score on the figures. And that's how Scott Hamilton won the gold medal for the United States. First one in 24 years.
Crazy.
He learned to love what he hated, what he struggled with so much.
Wow. Could you imagine if we took that approach to all the things that we struggle with and hate?
I know, right?
Yeah.
That takes dedication.
That takes dedication. That's a very cool story. I think, again, I feel like we're super lucky that Shane's dad put us into loads of sports from young age. So we experienced failure very young. You know, we would cry after losing. I remember being in the back of his dad's car crying because we lost an ice hockey game on the way home, or Shane cries because he let a few more goals in than he thought he should, or would lose in a race, or, you know, or so many sports we were in that failure was normal. And we realized amongst our friends, they didn't get it. We're like, of course you lose. We lose like multiple times a week sometimes. You know, we fall over and hurt ourselves. Before, you know, you fall over 1,000 times before you can skate, right? Talking about the skate as well, we learn how to skate. And when we came into the business world, when people were complaining that had just come out of university, we all got recruited. I started when I was 17. I never went to school. So I decided not to go to college or university. I wanted to go straight in to business, and the only way I could get in was through sales. So I started at 17. And I remember everyone complaining that the customers were saying no. And I was like, of course they're going to say no. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, you have to learn how to do it. Like, because I've been used to learning how to do things, right? And it's one of the reasons I got the job, because they said, you know, this is a job that requires 2 years sales experience, Chris, and a degree. And of course I had none of that. But I said to them, do you provide training? And they went, yeah. I said, why do I need a degree and experience if you're going to train me? And they looked at each other and they were like, and then they were like, no, but this is, and they said no. And I was like, well, can you explain why you need a degree to be great at sales? Again, the HR manager looks at the hiring manager, couldn't answer. They just couldn't answer. It was crazy. And they were like, oh no, Chris, you're not getting it. This is not the right fit for you. You know, and I was like, okay, I'll work for free. And they're like, what? This kid just won't go away. I was like, well, then I can learn how to sell through the summer holidays. And if you still don't want me, then you can let me go. And I was there for 10 years in that company and grew it. But I realized that our relationship with failure, even in that interview, I was like, you just got to keep asking, like, what's the worst case scenario? They're going to say no anyway. They already said no, actually. The worst case scenario photo already happened. So I was like, if I ask a few more times, and also at the same time, I thought that their explanation wasn't valid. Like, I didn't understand why you need a sales degree, a degree to be great at sales. And I didn't understand why, if you're going to train me, I need experience, because you're going to give me the experience. So I generally was just confused of the process of it as well. And by the way, when I left 10 years later, they still hadn't changed that policy.
Oh.
They still would only hire with a degree, and they still had to have experience, even though I was the most successful sales director in the whole company. And I was like, I hired Shane when the HR director was off on holiday. Just literally, HR director's off on holiday, so I snuck Shane in because I wasn't allowed to hire people without a degree or without 2 years old. And he got a sale before Jason got back. Therefore, he couldn't fire because he couldn't fire Shane, because I was like, look, he's already got a sale, so You're going to fire him, even though I went behind your back and hired him in. And he was really upset, but he couldn't fire him because I was like, he's made a sale. So, you know, and Shane was there for 7 years. So it's interesting. Yeah, I think it just goes along that point of like just pushing through no matter what, and don't let anyone tell you no.
Point number 2.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
that's exactly what that says. It's that overcoming challenges. It's always asking yourself, what is the strategy I haven't thought of yet? And I think your example of pushing through in order to get that sales job is just it. That really is the second element of success. That's exactly it. And in fact, I mentioned the story of Dr. Peggy Whitson, who is a biochemist and she's an astronaut. Now, she was working at NASA for years and she wanted to be an astronaut. Now, most of the astronauts who I interviewed actually did not get accepted on their first application. But Dr. Whitson actually, she applied, was rejected, applied, was rejected, applied, was rejected. And this went on for 10 years.
No way.
10 years.
Wow.
Yes.
10 years.
And she kept applying. Well, ultimately, she did get accepted because she did not give up. She kept saying to herself, what is the strategy I haven't thought of yet? And talk about learning from failures. Every time she learned, she understood what she can do better. Well, ultimately, she was accepted. Really good thing, because she spent more days in space than any American astronaut.
No way.
She became the commander, the first female commander of the International Space Station, a role she held twice. And this woman who was rejected for 10 years became NASA's chief astronaut.
It is crazy. Yeah. That's amazing, right? Because can you imagine, especially when someone says you are not good enough to be an astronaut, what it takes internally, the fire and desire to be like, I'm going to learn why they said no every time and figure out a different approach and keep going and going.
That's right.
And there's no surprise that when she got in the role, why she was so successful, because that all transcends. And that's what into everything. And that's kind of what I realized, that one, growing up very poor, not having much, my resilience was very high, which I didn't even realize was a skill. So what I saw is actually something I was embarrassed about. I was very embarrassed growing up about being poor. And I didn't know, I wish I knew that now, that actually was one of my biggest strengths of when people were like, this is a hard day. I'm like, you have no idea what a hard
you don't know what a hard day is.
You know what a hard day is. So I didn't realize that was one of my superpowers. Kind of, I call resilience one of my superpowers now. And when I got into on the ice, I remember some of the other kind of rich kids whose parents bought them all the brand new ice skates and sticks. I was like, it doesn't matter how rich you are, because when we walk on the ice, we're all equal. And I remember that one day, because I had hand-me-down, literally I had skates that were like 3 sizes too big. I had like body armor didn't even fit. It was like 10 years old and everything, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter because I was willing to skate harder than that person, go extra, train after. Even when we're not even on the ice, we'll train ourselves outside, take it to the next level. And then again, that translated into business.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if it was sales or Shane actually was planning to be a supply chain director of all things before he did this. He was really close to doing that. And it was like, we can do whatever we want, really. Even though I have no education, literally. I didn't learn how to read until I was maybe like 13, 14, I think it was. I remember my mum sitting down with a teacher saying, Chris has got learning difficulties. He's going to have to stay behind after school. And I had to stay behind after school, which was really embarrassing, to learn how to read and do maths and stuff. And it wasn't that I couldn't do it. I just didn't want to. Because I remember the moment I decided to learn how to read, literally, and write. And I was like, it's easy, it's fine. I just wasn't interested. I was like, give me a paintbrush, give me some clay, give me some pencils, and I can draw you a perfect portrait. But I was told that in school it was weird. Like, I could draw you a perfect portrait or paint you exactly. but if you asked me to write something down, I couldn't do it. It was terrible. But I was told that I was a failure for ages and ages. Even when we got into the business, I used to ask one of the team members to write my contracts and my emails, because I was so scared about writing I was told so often that I was terrible, that even when I was in business at like 17, I would call over AJ, who was on my team. I'm like, can you read this email for me? and make sure it makes
sense. Look at you now.
It makes sense. Well, I've got templates now. So it's fine. No, but it's fine now. But I think it's just one of those things, if you're told things enough as a child, is ingrained. But we've created a label, like I said earlier in the call, that we are great at everything. And it comes across arrogant to people, but we're like, we can do whatever we want. Like, build a website, fine. We build a website. We can learn how to do it. Bruno, he has no experience about producing the show. He's behind the camera right now. He's learning how to
making us look great.
Making us look great, sounding he's doing all of it. One of the questions I was really interested to ask you is, how has the book changed your own personal view on on your own success? And what does success look like to you, Ruth?
So I tell people I was patient zero. I tried everything on myself before I even wrote the book proposal. Once I figured out these 4 elements, I could not teach it to other people until I knew that it could work on regular average people like myself. And I tried it, and then I tried it on some friends, and all of a sudden you see their careers taking off. So I knew that I was onto something. So that made the book writing more urgent, because I needed to get this out. Because, as I said in the beginning, nobody wants to be average. People want to be successful. And we need to stop doing random things. We need to get more focused in how we're approaching this. And that's why it was so important to me to get the book out and to teach in the one-to-many models, where, the keynotes and things like that, because the more people we can teach this to, the greater the ripple effect. Now, what will happen is we're going to increase the bar of excellence in our families, in our organizations, in our home countries. Because if we can get everyone to do this, can you imagine the productivity, the efficiency, the impact that we could have?
The joy.
And we're going to love what we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah, it'd be amazing. So we're talking about the 4 steps. We're talking about the concept. What are some practical things that people can do? There's going to be so many HR executives listening to this call right now who are managing literally millions of employees. Yeah. What are some practical things that they can take away and do immediately?
And that's what the entire last third of the book, it's all about implementation. How do you implement each of the 4 practices? So you remember I said, it's not about waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning. That's a habit. It's really, what are you doing when you first wake up during the time that is your peak performance hours? And everyone has peak performance hours. We could both be working in the same place in the same organization doing the same thing, but your peak performance hours might be different than mine. So remember I said, I am a morning person. I get my best productive work done in the morning. Well, if that's the case, and if other people are like me, they're morning people, you cannot do passive tasks in the morning unless you absolutely have to. So for me, the types of things that take the most focus are the writing and the editing, which is why I always do it in the morning. Zoom meetings, responding to emails, doing those kinds of repetitive tasks that don't require the same brain power, that don't require the same focus, I leave that for the afternoon when I'm not as focused, when I'm a little bit more sluggish, because I am not burning my peak performance time with non-peak performance tasks. And we need to learn how to differentiate between that. So that's one of them. And the second thing is, you remember I told you that 4th element of success with that constantly learning through different ways. Mm-hmm. We are right now usually only teaching in one way. And that doesn't work for most people. We need to provide a buffet of options. And one of the things that's so important is that all of the extreme high achievers surrounded themselves with not one, but a team of mentors. So what are we doing within the organization to allow people to organically meet potential mentors? So I teach some of the ways to do that, how to approach people, because you should never ask someone to be your mentor. That sounds like you want them to take on another job, right? But I offer other ways that you can actually do that, which makes people want to help you, right? So all of these
What's an
ways to
example? What's an example of that, by the way? Because I would love to. What is
you want
another?
that?
How do I frame that?
Right.
Other than, can you be my mentor, please?
So if I said, Chris, will you be my mentor? And you're like,
Oh, so much work, time, invested.
what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Right? Like, where do we start? Right. But what if I said, Chris, I am working on something and I hit a challenge in this one particular area. I know you've done this before. I was wondering, before I reinvent the wheel, could I meet with you for 15, 20 minutes to go over my line of thinking and let me know, I really would want to get your perspective. Am I going off track? Is there something I'm not thinking of? Well, now I probably got you excited because I told you what it's about. It's for a finite period of time. I'm tapping into your expertise. There's actually a goal to this, right? Now you can actually help me, right? As opposed to, Chris, help me with my career. Well, what part, right? So I teach people how to develop mentoring teams and how to identify goals and plans. When I talk to people, most people don't even have a goal. They don't even know what their next goal is. No one has ever asked them. Well, how can you work towards something when you don't even know what it is?
Yeah.
So we really work on identifying that.
Wow. It's not what you say, is how you say it, right? It's just a different way of framing it. And also you're tapping into that person's like ego as well in a way. Like, yeah, I was gonna say, if you've done it, Chris, you've been successful, I'd love to run it by you. And they're like, yeah, sure. And
right.
To be honest, a few times that people have asked me in that same tone, I'm like, of course. Yeah. Right. With that lens, from that perspective. And again, I love your point. I always say to my friends, like, you can't hit a target you can't see.
Right.
That's right. And most people don't have one, and they wonder why they're feeling lost and kind of, I don't know where I'm going with my career or what I'm doing. I'm like, well, you need to take charge of it and have a very specific direction. And
you know what most people also don't know how to do? They don't know how to network. They don't know how to talk to people. It becomes very awkward. And I think it's gotten much worse over COVID because we've been so isolated and we haven't been able to interact with people face to face. And I actually teach people how to start conversations with strangers, because the goal is you don't want to just surround yourself with people you know.
Of course
you want to, grow your network and also talk to people who are in different fields, because that's innovation.
That's how we met now, right? Like I met Marshall.
I
met Marshall Goldsmith, through Chester Elton and many of the other 100 coaches leaders. Then they introduced me to other people. Then they introduced me to you, and here we are doing a podcast.
And here we are, right?
So it's maybe I take that for granted because again I've spent 15 years in sales, so kind of that's kind of ingrained in. I love sparking conversations with strangers or just reaching out to people and that I admire. And by the way, and I think it's what most people don't reach from because I've asked people why don't I do this, and it's always the same answer. They're just worried about not getting a reply, or they're worried about a no. And it's the same again in sales. If you had that same principle, then you would never do anything, because we always say, you're one step closer to a yes. And I had a friend recently, for example, who was trying to get a job, and he applied to one job and he was upset they didn't reply. And I was like, that's just the most ridiculous comment that I've ever heard. That you applied to, no, it wasn't one, it was a couple, and he didn't get any response, so he just stopped. And I was like, secondly, can you see the hiring manager's name? Just because when you go to apply to a job over on LinkedIn, as you know, you're all HR leaders, you probably post them, you can see the name of the person who posted it. I was like, why don't you message them directly?
That's right.
And he's like, what do you mean? He asked you to apply. I was like, so what? Where's he based? London? What company does he work for? Here's the switchboard. Why don't you call him? And he was like, what? And he called him and he got a job interview. Skipped the whole line.
And you risk the chance of them saying yes.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like, I can't believe that worked. And it's just funny because people don't even think they can even do that.
That's right. They're waiting for permission.
Yeah. Or even a lot of my friends, they were like, oh, how did you get that guest on the show? I can't believe you got that guest. I saw their TED Talk last week and you had them on the show. And I was like, so did I. And guess what? After I watched the TED Talk, I messaged them and said, hey, really, I loved your TED Talk. So cool. I'd love to share your work you're doing with our audience. And lo and behold, a week later they're on the show. Guess what? For every one reply, I get 100 that don't reply.
So do you think my contact list usually includes astronauts and Nobel Prize winners and Olympic and NBA champions?
Yeah, just casually, just giving them exactly. No, it's a really good one.
It's over 90, maybe 95% of the people was all through connections.
Yeah.
Right. Because people like to work with people who they know, like, and trust. So I knew some Nobel Prize winners from the work that I was doing. And I met an Olympian who then introduced me to other Olympians who then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when people know, like, and trust you, they are happy to extend their network to you. But you need to know how to connect with people, how to make people feel valued and
give value first before you ask. I think that's an important thing with networking as well. Like, and by the way, I say that know, like, and trust thing. My team is sick of hearing that, and anyone I speak to, I'm always saying that, and that's how I wouldn't be here with this show or even had this entire company. Everything has come from that, of giving back and offering value. Always. I remember Marshall Goldsmith, and he won't mind me saying this, when I first reached out to him when I was like a teenager, and asked him to do some work and come on the podcast. He was like, nope. And I was like, okay. And he was like, your show's not big enough. You don't have enough viewers. It's no value for me. And I remember being really upset at the time and being like, oh man, like, and then I was like, why would he? I haven't added any value to his life or offered any value. I've just gone in and asked for him to do something for me. And I remember every year I kept going back and I slowly wore him down until we came on the show. And now the team messages me saying, Marshall's got a new book out. Can he come on the show? We've come a long way. And obviously I'm very, very grateful to be part of the 100 coaches group as well with yourself. But I remember, like, the same thing, like very early on, it wasn't the case. I had to grow.
But you know what? So you were not afraid to ask, which I think is a pivotal point here. You were not afraid to ask, and you weren't afraid to ask again.
And again.
It's all about again. I have to tell you, I also incredibly respect Marshall Goldsmith. He is my mentor, and I still, because I respect him so much, I was shaking a little bit when I asked him if he would write the foreword to my book, which he did. But that happens sometimes when you have, you put people on a pedestal because you respect them so much. But one of the things I can tell you about people like Marshall Goldsmith and the astronauts and the NBA champions, they are regular people.
Yes.
They are regular people. Now, one of the things that's so funny, I had a lot of book launch events, but there was one on the book launch day for the people who are in the book, because I knew them all, but they didn't know each other. So I got a text message from one of the astronauts asking if Dr. Tony Fauci, who's leading the whole COVID response here in the United States, he's one of the people who I interviewed. He's in the book. So the astronaut asked if Dr. Fauci will be coming to the book launch party. And I said, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. He's a little busy. This is not really a good time. This was right when Omicron hit. So I said, oh, but this Nobel Prize winner will be there. And the astronaut said, oh, wow, a Nobel Prize winner. Now that's a high achiever. And I was thinking to myself, you're an astronaut. You went in a tin can in the sky. I think you're a high achiever. But I just realized that everyone who he knows is an astronaut. For him, that's not a high achiever. That's average. So a couple of months later, I told the story to the Nobel Prize winner. And he said, that's really fascinating, because I know so many Nobel Prize winners. We get together, we have events. It's like no big deal. But I don't know an astronaut. I've never met an astronaut. And he said, I think that's a really big achievement to be an astronaut. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So I said, well, I can fix this. So I introduced the astronaut to the Nobel Prize winner. Now they've got this whole bromance going because they realized how they have all of these incredible similarities. And I think at one point they'll probably collaborate on something together. But that goes back to your earlier point of give more than you take and give first. But also you are, the company that you keep really tells a lot about you. So if being an astronaut becomes average, imagine what you can do if you can start being around other high achievers, how that's going to elevate you, how that's going to improve your career, how you're going to start being so much more productive and effective and really start to ascend. So I get to hang out with Nobel Prize winners and NBA champions and astronauts and really emulate the 4 elements of success. And I think that's what has improved so much.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating story. It's almost crazy to hear them say that, right?
I know,
from what they've achieved. But it makes sense because the more you're in it, it just becomes normal, like everyday life. Like I spoke to I mentioned that I went to that mastermind, and one of the individuals that was at that meeting was in London last week, and he dropped me a message and he says, and again, it's just, for me, what he said kind of blew my mind, but for him, it was probably another day. He was like, oh yeah, I'm just flying in from Miami to see Elton John perform in Hyde Park. So I'm only there for the performance and I'm going back. So I was like, so I had to take it in for a second. Like, so you're just flying on your private jet from Miami to watch Elton John in Hyde Park, stop over. And I was like, oh, where are you off to next? And he's like, oh, we're just building, we've got 7 hotels that, it's a family run business, by the way, privately. We're building 7 hotels in Italy, so I'll be there for a few weeks. Feel free to come out. And we've got a yacht that we're hiring out, but he wasn't trying to be arrogant or show off. It's just, that's life.
In his world, that's normal.
That's a normal life. And I'm like, oh my God, high achiever, I'm like blown away by it. But then when I kind of talked to him about some of the stuff that I was doing when we met up, he was like, that's amazing. Chris, you did this, you did that. Like we did the summit last week with all those people attending. That must be so hard. And I'm like, this is normal every week. So yeah. But listen, I know I've got to let you run at some point. Before I let you go, parting takeaway for the audience, because there's so much, you've shared so many great insights for everyone. And also after that, where can people reach you if they want to reach out, connect with you, work with you? Where's the best place?
Sure. So one of the things that all the high achievers had in common, which I think is a very, very important lesson, is that they fear not trying more than they fear failing.
Yeah.
Fear not trying more than you fear failing. And I think I have that written over my desk because it gives that permission to take that strategic risk, to give someone the opportunity to say yes before I say no to myself. So I think that is just an incredible lesson that was coming through all the high achievers in all of the industry. So I think that's an important lesson. And to find me, it's just my name, Ruth Gotian. It's my website, ruthgotian.com, social media, and the book is called The Success Factor.
Amazing. I love that last part. By that advice is so important because again, I remember speaking to some friends recently and we had a Zoom call and they were like, oh, but what the consequences if we do it? And I was like, what are the consequences if you don't do it?
That's right.
And there was just some silence. There was some silence on the call. It's like, you're just going to be in the same place you are right now. So I love that. And for everyone listening, as always, those links are in the chat below. So if you want, make sure you go and connect and all of those fun things will be there, linked to the book, everything, the website. So make sure you do that and go and connect. But thank you so much for coming on the show, Ruth. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned so much and I'm really excited to follow you and all of the work that you put out because I think there's need more now than ever for some practical tools that people can use. And we've had a lot of people talk about this topic, but I love the fact that you put it into actionable tools that people can take away, implement, and really start to see the results. So thanks up. Keep up the amazing work and I'll see you again soon.
That's my goal. Thank you.
Thanks.